I stared at the letter in my trembling hands, my pulse hammering like a drum in my ears. The words on the page felt like a slap to the face. Dear Mr. Dawson, as the rightful owner of Whispering Pines Ranch, you now owe the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association a total of $87,920 in retroactive HOA fees. Payment is due within 14 days to avoid legal action. Failure to comply will result in property liens, legal penalties, and possible foreclosure. Foreclosure? My stomach twisted into a knot. This had to be a joke. I had never signed up for any HOA. Hell, I didn't even live in an HOA. I stormed outside, gripping the letter like it might burst into flames in my hand. The dusty path leading to my family's ranch stretched before me, a place that had been in my blood for generations. My grandfather had built this ranch with his own two hands. No homeowners association had ever touched this land. Not now, not ever. So why the hell was I suddenly being told that I owed them nearly 90 grand? Before I could even process my next move, a gleaming black SUV rolled up my dirt driveway, kicking up clouds of dust. The door opened, and out stepped her, a woman dressed in an expensive blazer, her expression smug, eyes gleaming like a snake sizing up its prey. Mr. Dawson, she called out, voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I'm Christine Holloway, the president of the Oak Ridge HOA. We need to talk about your outstanding balance. My fist clenched. This woman was out of her mind. I locked eyes with her. I'm not part of your damn HOA. Her lips curled into a smirk as she stepped forward, tapping her manicured nails against a thick folder in her hands. Oh, but you are. And whether you like it or not, you owe us. My gut told me one thing. This was only the beginning of a war. Christine Holloway stood there, her polished nails tapping rhythmically against that thick folder. The way she smirked made my blood boil. What part of I'm not part of your HOA do you not understand? I shot back, crossing my arms. Christine let out a small laugh, like I was some clueless fool. Oh, Mr. Dawson, you inherited this ranch, correct? I nodded stiffly. Then you also inherited its obligations. She flipped open the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Your grandfather failed to inform you, but this land was annexed into Oak Ridge HOA 10 years ago. That means... I grabbed the paper from her hands before she could finish. My eyes scanned the document, my pulse roaring in my ears. It looked like a contract, one stating that my grandfather had supposedly agreed to the HOA's rules and fees. My hands gripped the pages so hard my knuckles turned white. This had to be a lie. My grandfather would never have agreed to this, I said, my voice firm. Christine raised a perfectly plucked brow. And yet he did. I gritted my teeth. Even if that were true, I never signed anything. I never agreed to be part of this mess. You can't just force me to pay. Christine's smirk deepened. She took a slow step forward, lowering her voice to a whisper. Oh, but we can, and we will. Then she pulled out the last piece of paper. My stomach twisted into knots the moment I saw it. A lien notice. This is your official warning, Christine continued, her voice now completely devoid of its fake sweetness. If you don't pay, we'll place a lien on your property. And if that doesn't work, she tilted her head, her smile almost amused. We'll take your land. I took a step back, my mind racing. This was insanity. Christine Holloway and her HOA weren't just some annoying neighborhood busybodies. They were predators, and they were coming for everything I owned. Christine Holloway's smug face burned into my mind as I slammed my ranch house door shut behind me. My hands were still shaking as I dropped the so-called contract onto the wooden kitchen table. This was a scam. It had to be. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I knew who might have answers. Uncle Ray. The old man picked up on the second ring. Kid, what's wrong? You sound like you've seen a ghost. I let out a sharp breath. The HOA just showed up, Uncle Ray. They're claiming Grandpa signed some contract that put the ranch under their control. And now they're demanding I pay almost 90 grand in back fees. There was a long pause. Then, Uncle Ray swore under his breath. That's impossible. Your granddad hated HOAs more than he hated rattlesnakes. He'd never signed that. That's what I thought. I nearly shouted. But Christine Holloway, the HOA president, waved this contract in my face like it was the Holy Grail. It has his signature on it. Another pause. Then Uncle Ray said something that made my blood run cold. Son, that's impossible because your granddad couldn't even hold a pen 10 years ago. I nearly dropped the phone. What? His arthritis was so bad by then, he could barely sign his own name on a birthday card. No way in hell he signed a whole contract. A chill crept up my spine. If my grandfather didn't sign this, then someone else did. And that meant only one thing. The HOA had forged his signature. I gritted my teeth. I'm not letting these people take my land, Uncle Ray. If they want to fight, they've got one. Uncle Ray let out a low chuckle. That's the Dawson way. I'll help you however I can. As soon as I hung up, I knew what I had to do. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I was about to tear their entire operation apart. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by old ranch documents, legal records, and whatever scraps of paper my grandfather had left behind. If the HOA had forged his signature, I needed proof, something to tear their lies apart. By sunrise, my eyes burned from exhaustion, but my gut told me I was close to something. I dug through an old filing cabinet my grandfather kept in his study, dust flying everywhere as I pried open the rusted drawer. Then I found it. His will. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped through the fragile pages. My grandfather had explicitly stated that the ranch was to remain in the family without any interference from outside entities. And then I saw something even more damning. A letter, dated 10 years ago. It was from my grandfather, addressed to the Oak Ridge HOA. I skimmed the words, my pulse hammering. To whom it may concern, I do not agree to any HOA jurisdiction over my land. Any attempts to enforce your rules on Whispering Pines Ranch will be met with legal action. My land is private and will remain that way. Signed, Henry Dawson. I clenched my fist so hard the paper crinkled. This was proof. My grandfather never agreed to the HOA's terms. He had outright rejected them, which meant that Christine Holloway and her people had knowingly committed fraud. I grabbed my phone and snapped pictures of the letter, the will, and the so-called contract the HOA had given me. I needed a lawyer, fast. But just as I was about to dial, the rumble of an engine outside made me freeze. I peered through the window. A black SUV had pulled up. The same damn one Christine Holloway had arrived in the day before. And this time, she wasn't alone. 3 men in suits stepped out, their expressions cold and calculating. One of them pulled out a clipboard, while another adjusted his tie, scanning the ranch like it already belonged to them. I set my jaw. They thought they could intimidate me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I tightened my grip on my phone, my heart thudding like a war drum. Christine Holloway strutted toward my porch, her 3 suited goons flanking her like some mafia boss making a power move. I stepped outside before they could even knock. You've got some nerve showing up here again. Christine gave me that same smug smirk. Oh, Mr. Dawson, I was hoping you'd see reason. We wouldn't want things to get messy. She handed me a fresh stack of papers. A lawsuit. My stomach turned. These people were relentless. You can't be serious. I flipped through the pages. You're suing me for refusing to pay fees I don't owe. Christine's eyes gleamed. You misunderstand. Since you refused to comply with HOA regulations, we are now fining you for noncompliance. Every day that passes without payment increases your debt. The lawsuit will expedite foreclosure. Foreclosure. They wanted to steal my land. I clenched my jaw. You know damn well my grandfather never signed that contract. Christine's smirk didn't waver. Then prove in court. But legal battles are expensive, Mr. Dawson. Are you sure you can afford it? I glanced at her goons. One of them, a burly man with slick-back hair, grinned. They wanted to bleed me dry. Christine leaned in, lowering her voice. Or we could settle this quietly. I narrowed my eyes. What's that supposed to mean? She tapped a manicured nail against the lawsuit. Sign the papers. Acknowledge the HOA's authority. Pay a reduced fee of $50,000, and we forget the lawsuit ever existed. 50 grand. That was still robbery. I allowed a sharp breath. Not a chance. Christine sighed dramatically. Then I suppose we'll see you in court. She turned on her heel, motioning for her goons to follow. But as they reached the SUV, she paused. Oh, And one last thing, you might want to be careful. Accidents happen all the time out here in the countryside. The SUV roared to life, kicking up a cloud of dust as they sped off. My hands curled into fists. Was that a threat? One thing was clear, this wasn't just about money anymore. The HOA was willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. But they just made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. I stood on my porch, gripping the lawsuit papers so tightly my knuckles turned white. The dust from Christine's SUV settled, but the weight of her parting words still hung in the air. Accidents happen all the time out here in the countryside. That wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. I took a deep breath, shoving the papers under my arm as I marched back inside. If the HOA thought they could intimidate me, they were dead wrong. I grabbed my phone and dialed the first lawyer I could find with experience in property disputes and HOA fraud. A tired-sounding voice picked up. "James Adler, real estate law. What can I do for you?" I got straight to the point. I inherited a ranch. The local HOA is trying to claim I owe them nearly 90 grand in back fees. They're threatening foreclosure based on a contract they claim my grandfather signed. But I have proof he never did. There was a pause. Then, Adler's tone sharpened. "Fraud, huh? You got documents to back that up?" A letter from my grandfather rejecting their claims. His will explicitly stating he wanted no part of them. And here's the kicker. He physically couldn't sign contracts at the time they claimed he did. Adler let out a low whistle. "That's good. That's real good. You might have a case for fraud, extortion, and even property theft if we dig deep enough." I felt a flicker of hope until he spoke again. "But be warned, HOAs don't play fair. If they faked one document, they might fake more. Expect them to push back hard." I already knew that. Christine and her goons weren't going down without a fight. "What's my first move?" I asked. Adler didn't hesitate. "File a cease and desist order against them immediately. That'll put a temporary stop to their harassment while we gather evidence. In the meantime, I need copies of every document you have, contracts, letters, the lawsuit." "I'm on it." I hung up and got to work. If the HOA wanted a war, they were about to get one. But just as I was scanning the documents, I heard it. A loud bang from outside. I froze. My heart pounded as I rushed to the front door. When I stepped onto the porch, my stomach twisted. My fence had been destroyed. Wooden posts were shattered, tire marks ripped through the dirt, and my front gate was completely gone. Someone had driven straight through it. And there, nailed to the remains of my fence, was a bright red sign. Violation notice, property non-compliant with HOA regulations. Fines increasing daily. I ripped the sign down, my hands shaking. They weren't just suing me, they were escalating. And if this was their opening move, I had no doubt they were willing to go even further. I stood there, the shredded HOA violation notice crumpled in my fist, staring at the wreckage of my fence. My blood boiled. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was an outright attack. I whipped out my phone and took photos, every tire mark, every shattered post, and the damn sign they had the nerve to nail to my property. If they thought I'd just roll over, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't backing down. I dialed Adler again, barely waiting for him to say hello. They just destroyed my front fence. There was a pause. Then what? Someone rammed through my damn gate and left a violation notice. "They're escalating." Adler cursed under his breath. "All right, listen. This just went from a civil dispute to criminal property damage. Call the sheriff. Report this immediately." I swallowed hard. The thought had already crossed my mind, but the last thing I wanted was to be seen as some paranoid rancher crying to the cops. But this wasn't paranoia. This was war. I hung up and called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher listened, taking notes before saying, "We'll send a deputy out." That was something, but I wasn't about to sit around and wait. I grabbed my rifle from the gun rack inside, checked the chamber, and slung it over my shoulder before walking my property line. If the HOA thought I'd just cower inside, they didn't know who they were dealing with. Half an hour later, a dusty patrol car pulled up. A broad-shouldered deputy with a sun-creased face stepped out, adjusting his belt. "You Dawson?" he asked. "Yeah." I gestured to my broken fence. HOA hit me with a lawsuit, and now someone's running through my property like they own it. The deputy let out a slow whistle, walking over to inspect the damage. He bent down, running his fingers over the deep tire tracks. Those ain't just car tires. Looks like truck treads. Heavy duty. I stiffened. A hired crew? He stood, writing in his notepad. Got any cameras? I gritted my teeth. Not yet. Big mistake. The deputy sighed. Figures. Not much I can do without proof of who did it. I'll file a report, but unless you got video, it's your word against theirs. Frustration clawed at me. So, what? They just get away with it. Not if it happens again. He gave me a hard look. But if I were you, I'd get cameras up fast. He finished his notes, handed me a copy of the report, then tipped his hat. Keep your head on a swivel, Dawson. Seems like someone wants you off this land. I watched as he drove off, my grip tightening on my rifle. The HOA wanted to fight? They just made their biggest mistake. Because I wasn't just going to defend my land. I was going to expose every last one of them. The deputy's words rattled around in my head long after he drove off. Seems like someone wants you off this land. No, they want to take it. I had two choices. Wait for the next attack, or take the fight to them. I chose the latter. By nightfall, I was ready. First, I set up motion sensor cameras along the perimeter. Not just one or two. I installed 6 high-resolution, night vision security cameras. If anyone so much as breathed near my fence again, I'd have them on tape. Then, I took things a step further. I parked my old truck near the barn, leaving its headlights off, but the engine ready to roar to life at a moment's notice. If they came back, I wouldn't just watch. I'd be waiting. Finally, I made a few phone calls. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I needed a wild card. Midnight. I was wide awake, my rifle across my lap, my eyes locked on the gravel road leading to my property. The cameras fed live footage straight to my phone, and my gut told me something was coming. 1:42 a.m. A set of headlights appeared in the distance. I tensed, gripping my rifle tighter. The vehicle slowed as it neared my property line. Then, just like before, vroom, it charged straight at my fence. Crash. My wooden post shattered on impact. The truck skidded to a stop, and 2 figures jumped out, dressed in black. They were planting another violation notice. Not this time. I flipped on my truck's headlights and floored the gas. Hey! I roared, the engine growling as I sped toward them. They froze. One of them stumbled back, tripping over a broken post. The other bolted for their truck. Too late. The cameras had them. Faces. License plate. Everything. I slammed the brakes, stepping out with my rifle raised. You picked the wrong damn ranch. The guy who fell scrambled to his feet, panic in his eyes. We were just trespassing, vandalizing, destruction of property. I took a slow step forward, and I have it all on camera. Their driver gunned the engine. They were about to run. Not a chance. Red and blue lights exploded in the darkness. I smirked. Oh, did I forget to mention? I called the sheriff's department earlier. Figured they'd want to see who's been causing trouble. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop, sirens wailing. The would-be vandals didn't even fight. They threw up their hands as the deputies swarmed them. I watched as they were dragged away in cuffs. But before one of them was shoved into the squad car, I caught him muttering into his radio earpiece. Tell Christine. We failed. Christine. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some random act of HOA bullying. This was organized. And if they were willing to send people to sabotage my property, then what else were they planning? The sheriff's deputies had barely driven off with the trespassers when I realized the full weight of what just happened. Christine was behind this. She wasn't just some HOA busybody trying to squeeze extra cash out of homeowners. She was running something bigger, something illegal. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the footage. Crystal clear faces. The HOA board wouldn't be able to weasel their way out of this. I sent everything to James Adler, my lawyer. Got them on tape. 2 guys destroying my fence and planting another fake violation. One of them radioed Christine. HOA's running this like a mob. James Adler, this is gold. We'll take it to the DA first thing in the morning. But be careful, Dawson. If they're getting desperate, that means they have more to lose than just your land. I tightened my grip on my phone. That's what worried me. The next morning, I drove into town. I wasn't about to wait for them to strike again. I met Adler at the district attorney's office. We laid out the evidence, the falsified HOA documents, my grandfather's refusal letter, and now the clear-as-day footage of the HOA sending people to destroy my property. The DA, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Grayson, sat back in her chair after reviewing the files. She tapped her pen against her desk. "This is worse than I thought. You knew about them?" I asked. She sighed. "Christine Reynolds and her HOA have been on our radar for a while. We've had complaints, illegal fines, aggressive foreclosures, but nothing solid enough to go after them." I leaned forward. "So, what happens now?" She exhaled sharply. "We'll issue a subpoena for their financial records. If there's fraud, we'll find it. But it'll take time." Time. Something I wasn't sure I had. I shook her hand and left, but as I walked out of the building, a bad feeling settled in my gut. Christine knew they got caught. She wouldn't wait for the legal system to take its course. She'd make her next move soon. That night, it happened. I was inside, cleaning my rifle, when the security cameras sent an alert. "Motion detected. Back barn in trance." My heart pounded as I pulled up the footage. A figure in dark clothing crept along the side of my barn. Then, a flicker of orange light. I bolted up, eyes wide. Fire. I grabbed my rifle and ran out the back door. By the time I reached the barn, flames were licking up the wooden walls. Smoke curled into the sky, glowing in the darkness. I raised my gun, aiming into the shadows. "Come out. I see you." For a split second, I swore I saw movement, someone darting into the trees. But I had bigger problems. My barn was burning. I sprinted to the water pump, grabbing the hose. I fought like hell to put it out, but the flames were spreading too fast. By the time the fire department arrived, half my barn was gone. And as I stood there, coughing from the smoke, I knew one thing for sure. Christine wasn't trying to win anymore. She was trying to destroy me. The barn smoldered, blackened with still crackling as firefighters doused the last embers. My lungs burned from the smoke, but I didn't care. This was war. I turned to the fire chief. "Can you tell if it was arson?" He sighed, looking at the charred remains. "Given the way it started? Yeah, but proving it. I didn't need proof. I already knew who did it. Christine had just made her biggest mistake. I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with this." By morning, I was sitting in the sheriff's office, handing over my security footage. Deputy Carson frowned as he watched the video. Whoever set that fire knew what they were doing. But this figure, he rewound, trying to enhance the image. The second I saw the movement, my jaw clenched. It was Christine's son, Eric Reynolds. I had him. Sheriff Tate leaned back, arms crossed. That's enough for an arrest. I should have felt relieved, but I wasn't done yet. Christine had been running a racket for years, faking HOA violations, stealing money, forcing people out of their homes. The fire was just her final act of desperation. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Subject: urgent. HOA financial corruption evidence. Sent to District Attorney Linda Grayson. Attached were the bank statements James Adler had obtained through the subpoena. Christine had been skimming money off the top for years, laundering it through fake HOA projects. The DA replied almost immediately. "This is everything we need. I'm filing charges against Christine Reynolds and the HOA board. Arrest will happen today." By noon, it was all over. Christine was dragged out of her McMansion in cuffs, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You can't do this. I run this community. This is my neighborhood." The news vans caught every second of it. Eric Reynolds was booked for arson and trespassing. The HOA board members were hit with fraud charges. And me? I stood at the edge of my land, watching them go. Christine turned her head, locking eyes with me one last time. Pure hatred burned in her gaze. But all I did was smirk. "Told you, I'm not part of the HOA." 1 month later, the HOA was dissolved. Every homeowner scammed by Christine got their money back. I rebuilt my barn with community donations from neighbors who hated Christine as much as I did. And as for my ranch, it was mine. Always had been. Always would be. As I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over the land my grandfather left me, I finally felt at peace. Christine tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she lost everything instead. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment where you are watching from. See you in another video.